You've also mentioned sort of ethics and service here, William, in a way I really like, in that, you know, sometimes, for example, in the modern meditation, mindfulness, secular mindfulness, or yoga world, for example, there isn't always an emphasis on service. Like, I don't hear service mentioned in the yoga. It's, you know, it feels good. You know, we get kind of like a natural high and it's good for us. And maybe ethics is mentioned, you know, yamas and niyamas, but service and this idea of sort of being good for the planet is often not really considered. So it's lovely to hear that mentioned.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the current, it's sad for me as a kind of ex-60s hippie type radical to see what's happened to meditation in the woke generation. That one element of it has been very successfully commercialized and marketed, which is the self-soothing element of it. And I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to see the self-soothing. But that is only a very minor part of full and deep meditation. A much bigger part of meditation is that it is a spiritual practice. And if you would say to me in the pub, what do you mean by spiritual practice then? I would say...
Wanted to ask you about that as well.
I would respond, it's you working day by day on becoming more compassionate, more loving, more kind, and more conscious and awake, and having an expanded consciousness. And the whole of those two packages serving the community of humanity and all other beings on this planet. It's meditation is a spiritual practice, and in it, once you get past the self-soothing stage, you start to connect with more interesting things in your consciousness and in your sense and experience of what's going on. And I'm sure that will come, but at the moment we're in a very commercial stage of
it's almost enabling, isn't it? Self-soothing as a sort of enabling to deal with the fact that the planet and the economy and the injustices and all that's going on. But don't worry, do some yoga, do some mindfulness with your app, and then you'll feel good. Well, hang on a minute. If the planet's being set on fire and, you know, inequality is rampant, maybe we shouldn't be feeling good all the time. Maybe it might be quite a nice wake-up call to feel the distress of walking out into a polluted Moscow street and realizing the air is full of crap. You know, maybe self-soothing isn't ideal.
Yeah, but you as a martial artist, Mark, you know that in actual fact the solution is to be embodied, calm, and precisely at the same time noticing all the risks.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is the benefit of self-soothing, right? Effective action can only be taken from a place of calm and love.
Yeah, if you're not centered and calm. I used to teach foreign policy analysis at uni actually at one point, and my doctorate was in international relations and psychology, and over and over again, we just keep meeting that these stupid decisions are made when people in the foreign ministries get excited.
Interesting. Excited, that's a very
specific
excited word.
They lose their center. They lose their center and they go into groupthink. They just start thinking stupidly. And so I'm 100% with you. People need to be centered, embodied, and at the same time aware, fully conscious of what's going on around them. And that's courageous and disciplined and strong behavior.
Nice. It's interesting at the moment. I'm leading the Embodiment Conference, and we've got the run up to that right now.
Yeah.
I speak to sort of a couple of I've got a coach around this, and you know, she was basically saying, look, your job is to keep calm enough to not make any terrible decisions, and be a little bit calmer than all the people panicking that work with you.
Yeah.
And I was like, that sounds a fairly low bar. But then I thought, well, actually, if the average politician was to do those two things, we'd be in a much better place, you know. So that's my modest aim, William, for the next 3 weeks, is to not panic and make any horrible decisions and be a little bit less stressed than the people who work for me.
Well, yeah, I think you're probably I think you're underplaying it. I think something else happens in good leadership is you are the person who actually, because you're centered and calm and watchful, you have the big picture.
The vision.
You're the one person, but not just the vision, but how the strategy is unfolding. You have the big picture, and you know how. A friend of mine, very, very close friend of mine, was one of the leaders of the community arts movement, and he would come in with his team to build huge mosaics where there were community mosaics for disasters like the Aberfan disaster and stuff like that. There were thousands and thousands of pieces, and he was the leader of the project. And what he could do as the leader, which nobody else could do, was when a piece was put out of place, which would ultimately lead to the whole thing going wrong, he knew how to fix it.
Interesting.
Right. And I also lead a project, and I know that time after time, what I'm actually doing, apart from having a view on the strategy, is I'm the one I can see a mistake and I can nudge it back into the right direction and flow. And I think you can only do that if you're centered and calm.
Yeah. So this for you is a sort of essence of leadership and informed by your work, by the sounds of things. Obviously, this is very relevant to me right now.
Yeah.
I mean, spiritual leadership, what is that?
For me, the major, adding on to the things we've just spoken about, the major element for me is that as a lifestyle, I'm in hara. Am I to assume your listeners know what we mean by hara or not?
They might not. I mean,
okay. So in hara would mean, in my definition, would be you're at ease deeply into your body. You're anchored down in your body. You feel comfortable. You're walking around in that state. At its most simple, right? And then from that center and place of being at ease and wise, even if there's a crisis going on, my heart and consciousness are open, and I'm, in a sense, in my consciousness and my heart, I'm holding everybody. It's like I've got these wings extending out miles wide, and I'm holding everybody in the project. And I'm the one stable parental creature. And if something goes wrong and I become hysterical temporarily, I lose the plot, right? Which is what happens, we're human, right?
Sure. Yeah, I lose about once a week at least.
Yeah, well done, yeah. I know where to come home to. And
Right.
what I do, I come home to is I land back in my body and I come back to holding the people. Holding them and then looking to see, who do I have to bulldoze, who do I have to nudge, who do I have to inspire, but it's holding them, I think, is deep in what spiritual leadership is. And you see it with wonderful self-sacrificing military officers, sergeant majors on the field. There they are in the battle, on the field, and they are aware of all their comrades. They hold the space for them, and they're aware they're not moving until they've got everybody back home. There's an awareness of everyone. And you can walk I reckon I can walk into a school or hospital, and I will know almost immediately whether the CEO walks through that school, that hospital, holding space, whether they're embodied and at ease and holding space. And I've seen some wonderful models of that, and some really, really bad ones.
It's good to have it. William, I love you already. I really want to just keep you in my pocket for the next 3 weeks and just occasionally get you out and say, what was that again, William? Yeah. This is some good advice for me, for certainly. And the other thing I've heard that you do, which I really like, is explain or help introduce the idea of spirituality in a very down-to-earth way. I think this is almost a sort of quite a British gift in a way, that if it's too esoteric, it can turn people off. But actually, everybody has a spirituality. Everyone has a way into this. And I've heard maybe you could talk about some of the ways you talk to the bloke down the pub.
Yeah, I think the important thing, first of all, is this when I talk about spirituality, or my mates talk about spirituality, we're keeping it really simple. We're saying it's your connection with the wonder and energy of life. And you may have different names for the wonder and energy of life. You may call it God, you may call it the Tao, you may call it Goddess, you may call it unity or the mystery, but it's I find in English anyway, that particular phrase, the wonder and energy, kind of works a bit, because there's always a tap dance in these conversations because people think you're going to lay a trip on them,
Right.
So if we start from the premise of in the pub, right? What are you into? I'm into spirituality. Fuck off. No, really. Right? Then, so what do you mean? I say connecting with the wonder and energy of life. So what are you talking about? I say, okay, when do you connect with the wonder and energy of life? Do you connect it when your team wins, or when you're with your children, or when you're out in landscape, or when you're sitting next to a stream? When do you connect? I don't know. When is it for you? And they'll go, oh, well, that's an interesting question, Very straight person. Go, yeah, well, actually, I quite like going for walks. So there's this view I like, or I'm listening to this music and it works for me. And I said, there you go. There's your gateway.
There's your way in. Everyone's got something, right?
Yeah.
Music, sex,
Yeah.
sports, nature. For so many people in Britain, it's nature, isn't it? Like gardening, walking. Who doesn't have a spiritual experience, in the Peak District?
Well, they did some research on who has spiritual experiences, and
Yeah.
70% of the feedback was that it happens out in landscape most easily for people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And you think of how popular it is in the Lake District, the Peak District. Like, it's just full of people.
I know.
And these are regular people. These aren't the Glastonbury or Brighton people like us. These are regular people from Manchester and Leeds and London.
And people convalesce out in the landscape. Yeah, I was meaning to bike up to Snowdon actually a couple of weeks ago, and I was told that it was just completely packed. There was a queue of people.
Yeah. A queue at a cafe. And
Yeah.
this might not be obvious to people listening in the States. Our audience is sort of, 1/4 British, but even more from the States and other countries. And we do in Britain have this sort of native pagan influence spirituality, sort of land-based spirituality, don't we? Which is, if you live in Glastonbury, is pretty normal, but it might not be so obvious to listeners from other countries, who are non-Indigenous in a way. Like, there is an indigenous spirituality to the UK, which is quite resurgent.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of witches and pagans in the UK, but there's a lot of them all over the world, actually. I mean,
Okay.
I study this stuff professionally because it's my biz, so to speak, and there's a growing, huge surge of awareness that nature is a prime way that people connect with the metaphysical, with the spiritual. It's where it was biggest actually in Europe was in Germany.
Germany.
Germany,
I was in Hungary. It had a bit of a felt sense of it there.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up with maypole dancing in school.
That's
this
right.
huge, young ladies wrapping red ribbons around a phallic pole. I mean, this was a normal thing for us every spring. It had some sort of Christian trappings, but it wasn't really.
Yeah, I've done Morris dancing with bikers.
That's living the dream right there.
It's noisy and raucous.
So this sort of way in, then you just say, what makes you feel fully alive, or where's the wonder, the energy of life, or you look for those places where people are naturally having those transcendent experiences. So
I don't even use the word transcendent because I think that's too posh. I just keep it as you're having an experience of the wonder and energy. Now the next thing is, in terms of the coaching and teaching I do, is I say to the person, do you want to deepen that?
Right.
Because if you want to deepen it, there's some tools that everybody uses, and one of them, of course, is embodiment, right? So there you are having this experience of connection. Don't care where and how it's happening. Could be watching television with your children eating white bread jam sandwiches. If you're having that sense of connection, what you need to do is pause internally and go, oh, I'm having this experience.
Notice it.
Notice it, and allow yourself to go into the feeling of it. The phrase I often use, and it's different from a kind of martial arts approach, is it's like being in a warm bath and allowing yourself to soak.
Mm-hmm.
Like being a warm sponge, letting warm water in. And everybody knows because I think you need to give people metaphors that work in real life. So I can say to even the most hardened bloke, I can say, look, it's like you get in a warm, nice bath, and you could get out quickly, but there comes a moment when you go, I think I'm just going to stay in it a bit longer and relax. And they go, yeah. They say, yeah, I know what that feels like. So this is what we're talking about. So there you are. You've spotted a view you love. Just allow yourself to relax into it. Yeah, exactly. Like you make that noise. And I then, a few hints about breath, a few hints about sinking down into the body, a few more hints about abdominal breath, and we've got people pretty centered and connected.
Before you know it, they're doing embodied spirituality. Okay. So any other sort of basic stuff you do with people then? So it's like, okay, notice it, start to work with the breath a little bit. Like, what are some of the ways to deepen that? If someone said, I'm bloke down the pub, I don't really talk about spiritual stuff. I don't do chakras. I don't do meditation, but I realize there's something going on when I go to the Peak District or in my gardening, and I want to deepen that. Like, what are your other?
So I use two very simple strategies, actually. Very, very simple, which you'll just go, yeah, I know that. But brackets, first of all, breath is good, except in my experience, 1 in 10 people go into panic if you ask them to stay with their breath. So you need to be careful about it.
Yes, makes them anxious, yeah.
But what doesn't make them anxious is if they're asked to just do 3 or 4 breaths.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll hear me saying over and over again, we'll now take 3 or 4 soft, slow, silken, and I say explicitly, I don't want to hear you.
Okay.
Slow breaths down into your abdomen, 3 or 4. And that just almost inevitably, impeccably gives them a taste of what happens when the neuroendocrinal system is guided down into being at ease. There's somebody in the driver's seat. There's somebody in the throne doing something that softens and puts the body at ease and allows them to be more receptive. I find that works impeccably.